914 prepared for takeoff from New York's LaGuardia Airport. The destination, Miami, Florida. The flight was routine, a 2-hour journey carrying 57 passengers and 4 crew members, including the experienced pilot, Captain Raymond Walker. The boarding gates buzzed with the usual chatter. Families with vacation plans, businessmen rushing calls, and children waving toy airplanes. No one knew that this would be the last time Flight 914 was seen, for decades. The calm before takeoff. Inside the cockpit, Captain Walker adjusted his cap and checked his watch. 8:45, he muttered. Right on schedule. His co-pilot, James Reynolds, ran through the final checklist. The radio crackled as the control tower gave clearance. Pan American Flight 914, you are clear for takeoff. Wind speed 10 knots east. Godspeed. Roger that, tower, Walker replied, pushing the throttle forward. The engines roared to life. The massive silver aircraft began to roll down the runway, gaining speed until it lifted into the cloudless blue. Passengers clapped lightly as the plane ascended. A mother soothed her baby. A man in a grey suit ordered a scotch from the stewardess. Everything was ordinary. Perfect even. But at 9:07 a.m., somewhere over the Atlantic coast, something extraordinary began. The vanishing signal. In the control tower, air traffic controller David Hensley frowned at his radar screen. Flight 914's blip, the glowing green dot that marked its position, flickered, then vanished. Strange, he said, adjusting the radar knobs. Maybe a temporary glitch. He radioed the pilot. Pan Am 914, do you copy? Static. Flight 914, this is LaGuardia Tower. You're off radar. Please confirm your coordinates. Nothing. The frequency filled only with a strange low hum, like distant thunder, though the skies were clear. Within minutes, the plane had disappeared from every radar in the region. Air traffic control declared an emergency. Search and rescue operations were launched along the east coast. The Coast Guard combed the waters, helicopters scanned the shoreline, and military radar was engaged. But there was no trace, no wreckage, no signal, no distress call. It was as if Flight 914 had simply ceased to exist. Families in mourning. In New York, the families of passengers gathered in waiting halls, holding on to hope as hours turned into days. Airline representatives gave polite statements about communication loss and ongoing investigations. A week later, the flight was officially declared missing. Newspapers across America carried the headline, open quote, "Mystery in the sky, Flight 914 vanishes without a trace." Close quote, conspiracy theories erupted. Some claimed a mechanical failure caused the plane to crash into the Atlantic. Others whispered about Cold War sabotage or even UFO abduction. But one woman, Margaret Collins, the wife of a passenger named Peter Collins, refused to believe her husband was gone. She said she still dreamed of him, calling her name from inside a fog. The unexplained radio signal months passed. Then, in December 1955, a strange thing happened. A small private airfield in Caracas, Venezuela, picked up an unidentified radio transmission. Caracas Control, this is Pan Am Flight 914, requesting landing clearance. The control officer, Juan Morales, nearly spilled his coffee. Pan Am 914? Repeat, did you say Pan Am 914? Yes, Flight 914 from New York to Miami, ETA 9:45 a.m., requesting landing instructions. Morales blinked in disbelief. Sir, did you say New York to Miami? You're more than 2,000 miles off course. There was silence. Then the pilot's voice again, calm but confused. Negative, sir. We're right on schedule. Estimated arrival Miami 9:55. Morales exchanged looks with his colleague. He quickly pulled out the day's date on the calendar. Captain, he said carefully, today is May 21st, 1985. A pause. Then, over the radio, a sharp intake of breath. What did you just say? The impossible return. As Morales stared out from the tower window, his jaw dropped. Out of the clouds, a silver Douglas DC-4 aircraft was descending, the same model used in the 1950s. He scrambled for binoculars. The plane's registration number was visible, N3794D, the exact tail number of Pan Am Flight 914, missing for 30 years. The plane made a smooth landing, tires screeching against the tarmac. Ground crew rushed forward. The cabin windows looked foggy, almost frosted from the inside. When the door opened, the first thing they felt was a cold gust of air, though the Venezuelan sun blazed hot above. The pilot stepped out, eyes wide with shock. Where are we? This This isn't Miami. He held a flight manifest dated July 2nd, 1955. Morales couldn't speak. Every clock, every instrument, every piece of equipment on that plane was 3 decades out of time, yet perfectly preserved. Vanished again. Before authorities could investigate, something even stranger happened. As ground control approached, the pilot shouted in panic, "Stay back! We're leaving!" He rushed back inside. The engines roared, the plane taxied to the runway, and before anyone could stop it, took off again, disappearing into the sky. Radar tracked it for less than 3 minutes before it vanished again. This time there was no signal, no visual, no trace. All that remained was a small calendar page dropped on the runway, dated July 2nd, 1955. The fear begins. The world called it a hoax. Officials buried the story. But the few who saw the plane that day never forgot the sound, the unnatural hum in the air, the chilling cold wind, and the faces in the cabin windows that looked both human and not quite alive. Something had come back that shouldn't have. Something was still out there, flying through the skies, trapped between time and death. The story of Flight 914 was buried for years. Officials denied everything. Newspapers in Venezuela published a few lines before the articles were suddenly pulled. But for those who had seen it with their own eyes, the truth was impossible to forget. One of them was Juan Morales, the air traffic controller from Caracas. From that day on, he could not sleep. Every night he heard the same voice over the radio, faint, distant, calling through static. Open quote, "Caracas Control. This is Pan Am 914, requesting landing clearance." Close quote. At first, he thought it was a dream, until others began hearing it too. The haunting transmission. By 1986, reports began surfacing again. Small airports across South America and even the Caribbean picked up ghostly radio transmissions. All used the same frequency. All claimed to be from Flight 914. Sometimes the voices came clear as day, sometimes just whispers drowned by interference. The messages were always the same. Open quote, "This is Pan American Flight 914, en route to Miami. Time of arrival 9:55. Close quote. Each time, the message ended with that same chilling low hum, the same sound that had filled Morales' control room the day the plane landed and vanished. Engineers tried tracing the frequency. It moved unpredictably, like lightning across the sky. Radar would flicker, for a moment, showing a faint blip before vanishing again. It was as though Flight 914 still flew, somewhere between our time and another. The Investigator. In 1989, Dr. Harold Jenkins, a retired aviation investigator, heard the rumors and decided to dig deeper. Jenkins had spent years researching mysterious disappearances, ships in the Bermuda Triangle, lost flights, and missing crews. When he heard of Flight 914's return, he tracked down Morales, now an old man living outside Caracas. Morales greeted him nervously, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "You don't want to know, Dr. Jenkins," Morales warned. "It's not a plane anymore. Whatever it is, it shouldn't exist." Jenkins pressed on. "You saw it land with your own eyes?" Morales nodded slowly. "Yes, and I saw the faces of the passengers through the windows. They were smiling, but not human smiles. Their eyes were blank, like glass." He shivered. They didn't blink. Jenkins recorded everything. He compared the flight logs, weather data, and radar reports. What he found was impossible. The radio frequency used by the plane didn't exist in 1955. It was a military emergency band introduced only in 1969, 14 years after the plane's disappearance. How could a pilot in 1955 use a radio that didn't exist yet? Jenkins whispered. That question became his obsession. The survivors that weren't in 1990, a man claiming to be Peter Collins, one of the passengers declared dead on Flight 914, appeared at the U.S. Embassy in Caracas. He looked confused, pale, and disoriented. He said he had just landed from Miami. When questioned, he produced an old boarding pass dated July 2nd, 1955, and a wallet filled with crisp 1950s bills, none of which showed signs of age. But there was something deeply wrong about him. His body temperature was below 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius, and his pupils barely reacted to light. After 3 days, he vanished from the hospital where he was being kept, without a trace. Security cameras froze for 7 minutes, and when the system rebooted, he was gone. That night, witnesses reported seeing a low-flying airplane, soundless, gliding through the clouds, its lights flickering like dying stars. The Black Box. Determined to find answers, Dr. Jenkins travelled to New York to meet with Pan American's Archives Division. The company had shut down years earlier, but he managed to access sealed documents. Inside an old wooden crate marked 940, he found a black box recorder, recovered from the sea off Puerto Rico in 1989. Experts had never been able to identify which aircraft it belonged to, but inside the metal casing, the manufacturer's serial number matched, Flight 914's transponder ID. Jenkins had the tape restored. When the playback began, the room went cold. The recording began with normal chatter between Captain Walker and his co-pilot. Then, silence. A strange frequency hummed. The pilot spoke again, his voice trembling. Open quote, "Something's wrong with the sky. I can't see the sun. It's all white." Close quote. Then the co-pilot, open quote, "Captain, the instruments are spinning, all of them. It's like time is moving backwards." Close quote. There was a high-pitched whine and screaming. Then a faint voice whispered through the static. Open quote, "We are not alone in the clouds." Close quote. The tape ended. The government files soon after. Dr. Jenkins received a call from a man identifying himself as Agent Hawkins from the U.S. Department of Aviation Security. "We understand you've been investigating Flight 914, the voice said calmly. "You need to stop, immediately." Jenkins protested. "People have a right to know the truth." "There is no truth," Hawkins replied. "There never was a Flight 914. Days later, Jenkins's home office was broken into. His research papers were gone. His phone stopped working. His friends reported seeing black cars parked outside his house at night. But the transmissions didn't stop. Shortwave radio enthusiasts across the world began reporting a ghost frequency. Always the same voice. Open quote, "This is Pan Am Flight 914, requesting landing clearance." Close quote. Sometimes, after the message ended, listeners claimed to hear screams in the static. Morales' final night. By 1995, Juan Morales was dying. In his final days, he made one last call to Dr. Jenkins. His voice shook as he whispered, "They came back, Harold. They found me." "What do you mean?" Jenkins asked, terrified. "I heard them outside my house last night, the sound of engines, faint, above the trees. I looked out my window and saw the plane again, glowing, hovering without wings moving." Morales coughed violently. "They were looking down at me from the windows. The passengers, they haven't aged. Their faces, they want me to come with them." Then the line went dead. The next morning, Morales was found in his home, his face frozen in terror, eyes wide open. His radio was still on, tuned to a dead frequency, yet faintly playing the words, open quote, "Caracas Control, this is Pan Am Flight 940. Close quote. That same night, radar stations across the Caribbean picked up an unidentified aircraft moving against the wind, matching the exact coordinates of where Flight 914 had first vanished in 1955. The object glowed with unnatural light before fading into nothing. But one final message was recorded on an emergency channel, a chilling whisper in Captain Walker's voice. Open quote, "We can see the ground again, but it's not Earth." Close quote. The late 1990s, the story of Flight 914 had slipped into legend, a ghost tale whispered among pilots and radio operators. But in secret corners of the aviation world, people still received the strange frequency, faint, recurring, and always the same. Open quote, "Pan Am Flight 914, requesting landing clearance." Close quote. The signal came like a heartbeat through the static, steady and endless. And then, one night in 1997, it changed. Open quote, "Caracas Control, this is Pan Am Flight 914, we are landing." Close quote. A plane in the desert, hundreds of miles from any city, deep in the Venezuelan desert, a small oil crew reported an aircraft landing in the dunes, silently, without lights. The men thought it was a hallucination caused by heat until they walked closer. There it was. A silver Douglas DC-4, engines dead, sitting in the sand like a fossil of the past. Its logo, Pan American World Airways, glowed faintly in the moonlight. The workers called the local authorities, who contacted Dr. Harold Jenkins, now famous for his obsession with the Flight 914 mystery. By dawn, he was there. Jenkins's hands trembled as he approached the fuselage. The plane looked brand new, not a trace of rust or dust. Even the paint shimmered like it had just rolled out of a 1950s hangar. The cockpit window was cracked open. Inside, everything was preserved. Flight manuals, coffee cups, half-eaten biscuits, and a pilot's cap on the dashboard. But the cabin door was unlocked. He stepped inside. The frozen cabin. The air was ice-cold. Frost coated the overhead compartments. Jenkins's breath formed clouds as he moved down the aisle. Rows of passengers sat perfectly still, every seat occupied. They were there. 57 passengers, frozen in place, eyes open, skin pale, faces peaceful as if caught in mid-breath. But there was something unnatural about them. When Jenkins shone his flashlight on their faces, their pupils reflected the light like a cat's eyes, glimmering silver. He felt watched. As he reached the last row, he noticed one of the passengers, a young boy clutching a toy airplane, had a tear of blood frozen on his cheek. Then, suddenly, the intercom crackled. Open quote, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Close quote. The voice was faint, distant, yet it came from nowhere. Open quote, "We've reached our destination. Please remain seated." Close quote. Jenkins stumbled back, heart racing. The cockpit was empty. The engines began to hum, even though the fuel tanks were dry. Outside, the plane's lights flickered to life, glowing with blinding white radiance. The desert sand started to swirl around it like a storm. Jenkins barely escaped before the plane vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a deep circular burn mark in the sand. The return of the passengers. Days later, strange events began across South America. At airports in Bogotá, Lima and Santiago, surveillance cameras captured footage of people walking aimlessly across terminals, dressed in 1950s clothing, barefoot, confused and pale. They said the same thing over and over again. Open quote, "We just landed from Miami." Close quote. Authorities detained several of them. When questioned, they spoke as if no time had passed. They remembered the flight, the turbulence, the blinding light, then waking up on the runway. Medical tests showed they hadn't aged a day since 1955, but their fingerprints, they didn't match any living records. Their DNA carried mutations unknown to science. Strange, luminous proteins that reacted to ultraviolet light. Doctors called it a miracle. Investigators called it a cover-up. But those who examined the passengers too closely began to disappear. The return of the pilot. In late 1998, a Pan Am uniform was found folded neatly on the doorstep of Dr. Jenkins's home. Inside was a note written in trembling ink. Open quote, "We are home now, but the sky is not finished with us." Close quote. That night, Jenkins's neighbor saw him standing in the street, looking up. Above his house, a silver plane circled silently. No sound, no light, just the faint shimmer of moonlight reflecting off its wings. The next morning, Jenkins was gone. His door was open. His study lights were on. On his desk lay a cassette tape, labeled Flight 914, Final Report. The tape. When investigators played the tape, the sound was distorted, but one voice was clear, Jenkins's. Open quote, "I saw them. They are alive, but they aren't what they were. Their eyes glow in the dark. They say they hear the captain in their heads, calling them back." Close quote. He breathed heavily. Open quote, "They said something about the white sky, a place where time doesn't move. The passengers claim they saw figures outside the plane, watching them, whispering through the clouds." Close quote. There was a loud metallic sound, like a door opening, and Jenkins gasped. Open quote, "No, not you. You can't be." Close quote, static. Then faintly, open quote, "This is your captain speaking." Close quote. Open quote, "Prepare for final descent." Close quote. The white sky months later, a meteorological satellite captured an anomaly over the Caribbean Sea, a dense cloud formation shaped exactly like a plane moving against the wind. Inside the cloud, radar detected metallic objects, hundreds of them, suspended in motion. When the footage was analyzed, one of the shapes resembled the Pan Am 914, flying through a tunnel of light. But inside that glowing corridor, something else was visible. Faces pressed against the windows, mouths open as if screaming silently. The image was leaked to the public before it was erased from all official records. The survivor's curse. By 2000, the few remaining survivors of Flight 914 began dying mysteriously, each exactly at 9:55 a.m., the plane's supposed arrival time in Miami. Witnesses claimed they saw light shining through their eyes before they collapsed. Autopsies revealed no cause of death. only that their hearts had stopped as if responding to an unseen signal. Rumours spread that Flight 914 had become a vessel of the afterlife, carrying souls that crossed the wrong boundary between time and death. And the pilot, Captain Walker, was no longer human, but something else entirely. A guide, forever flying through the storm between worlds, searching for passengers to replace the ones who escaped. The broadcast on July 2, 2001, exactly 46 years after the flight's disappearance, every air traffic control frequency in the Western Hemisphere received the same message simultaneously. Open quote, "This is Pan Am Flight 914, passengers aboard, approaching final destination." Close quote, no one could trace it. No radar detected anything. But in several cities, people looked up and swore they saw a plane, gleaming silver, silent, moving through clouds that glowed white like daylight. For a brief moment, every clock froze at 9:55 a.m. When time resumed, the sky was empty. The year was 2002, nearly half a century after the disappearance of Pan Am Flight 914. By now it was legend, the ghost plane that defied time, the flight that returned from nowhere. But in the secret archives of multiple governments, one truth was whispered. Open quote, Flight 914 was still flying. Close quote. The return to the sky high above the Atlantic, military radar in Florida detected a faint signature moving east, an old DC-4 aircraft traveling at 500 knots. At first, the operators laughed. "That's impossible," one said. "That plane doesn't even exist anymore." But as the blip grew stronger, their laughter died. The call came through, scratchy but unmistakable. Open quote, "Miami Tower, this is Pan Am Flight 914, requesting landing clearance, ETA 9:55, close quote. Every controller in the room froze. The voice was calm, clear, Captain Walker's voice, the same man who had vanished in 1955. "Flight 914, the lead controller stammered, "You've been missing for decades. Identify yourself." Silence. Then, after a few seconds, open quote, "We never left Tower. We've just been waiting for you," close quote. The lights in the control room flickered. The radar screens went black. When they rebooted, the signal was gone. But 5 minutes later, a Pan Am aircraft was seen descending over the ocean, silver, gleaming, untouched by time. The Miami landing crowds gathered near the coast as the news broke. Helicopters hovered as the mysterious aircraft approached Miami International Airport, its original destination. It landed smoothly on runway 12, tires screeching against the asphalt, engines roaring like thunder. As emergency crews surrounded the plane, the temperature dropped across the entire airfield. Breath misted in the hot Florida air. The engines went silent. For a moment, no one moved. Then the cabin door opened, slowly, with a long metallic creak. Inside stood Captain Raymond Walker, pale, expressionless, his eyes glowing faint silver. Behind him, the passengers sat motionless, staring straight ahead. A medic stepped forward. "Sir, are you all right? Where have you been?" Walker turned his head slowly. "We told you. We just came from Miami." The time that stood still. When authorities entered the plane, they found every clock inside frozen at 9:55 a.m., the time of the original flight's scheduled arrival in 1955. The air smelled of cold metal and ozone. Paper coffee cups lay untouched, still full. Yet every digital device near the plane, phones, radios, cameras, stopped working the moment they got within 50 feet. A military containment team sealed off the runway. The passengers were removed and taken to an underground quarantine site. There were 61 of them, the same number as listed on the original manifest. Every one of them alive. Every one of them unaged. And every one of them whispering the same words under their breath. Open quote, "The sky is white. The sky is hungry." Close quote. The interviews, doctors and psychologists were brought in. None could explain what they found. The passengers' DNA sequences showed patterns not found in humans. Their brain activity pulsed in strange rhythmic bursts, like radio signals. When asked where they had been, one woman whispered, open quote, "There was no time, only light." The captain said we crossed a door. Close quote. Another said, open quote, "Something flew with us. We couldn't see it, but we could feel it breathing." Close quote. The investigators asked what it wanted. The woman looked up with empty eyes. Open quote. "To come home." Close quote. The disappearance of the base. Within days, the government facility where the passengers were kept went dark. Every satellite feed over the region glitched for 6 minutes. When communication was restored, the entire base was gone, wiped from the map. In its place was a crater, smooth, circular, and glassy, as if something immense and hot had descended from above. Locals near the site reported seeing a blinding white cloud in the sky, shaped like a plane, moving silently eastward. The final message. 3 months later, Dr. Harold Jenkins's lost cassette was found in an evidence locker at Langley Air Force Base. It contained one final message, recorded just before his disappearance. Open quote, "They told me they weren't passengers anymore. They're conduits, carriers of whatever followed them through that white sky. The plane isn't just an aircraft, it's a gate." Close quote. Open quote, "When they came back, something came with them. Something that doesn't belong to our world." Close quote. The tape hissed. Then, faintly, the same voice that haunted radios for decades whispered, open quote, "Prepare for final descent." Close quote. The sky opens on July 2nd, 2005, the 50th anniversary of the flight's departure. The phenomenon returned. At exactly 9:55 a.m., radar stations across the globe picked up dozens of identical signals, all reading, open quote, "This is Pan Am Flight 914, requesting landing clearance." Close quote. Hundreds of pilots reported seeing silver planes gliding through the clouds, all identical, all bearing the same registration number, N3794D. The skies filled with echoes of engines. Cities from Caracas to New York reported unnatural daylight, the sky turning white like frozen lightning. Witnesses looked up and swore they saw faces in the clouds, pressed against invisible glass. Then, as quickly as it began, the skies cleared. But on every runway in every airport that received the transmission, a single calendar page appeared, fluttering in the wind. The date, July 2nd, 1955. The endless flight. Since then, pilots crossing the Atlantic still report strange sightings, glowing objects that appear beside their planes, moving silently through the mist. Some say if you tune your radio just right, between frequencies, you can still hear it. Open quote, "This is Pan Am Flight 914, en route to Miami." Close quote. No one knows where it flies now. Some believe it circles the Earth endlessly, trapped between worlds. Others whisper that it's still searching for new passengers. And if you ever look up at the night sky and see a faint silver glimmer moving with no sound, no contrail, and no explanation, pray it doesn't see you, because Flight 914 is still out there and it's still boarding.